Hello from Iconic Studios. My name's Andy.
And I'm Jo.
And we're here to complete with you the final assault, which is the final part of the They Live Assault on Cable 54 gameplay video. Last time we spoke to you, we showed you, all the gameplay steps, how we've got to this point. We'd accrued resources from the Resistance, and we'd built up our deck, and we'd shown you how to actually pay things in so you could have enough equipment to be able to survive the epic ending like in the movie. So today we're going to come back to that and show you actually how this works, how the invaders reveal themselves if they make it to the end, and how each step along the way takes place. But we will have a few house rules just to start with, just so you're clear on A, how our test kit works, and B, how we've been testing overall and how it works altogether. So obviously we've shown you a number of times the Resistance resource cards with the special hidden information on that you see through our polarization that we've done. However, in testing, these were not something that we would use traditionally. What we would normally do is use the Resistance resource deck, which would comprise of cards that were marked A and B, and we would run an algorithm which would decide for the whole game, for each individual turn, if A or B was a invader card or a human card. Now, the purpose of this is we didn't want game testers to be in the situation where they always knew A or B was an invader, so that algorithm enabled us to make it fair every time that we play tested through the game. For the sake of today's demonstration, however, I think it would be far more simple, rather than having to revert to a spreadsheet each time, to just say A are human cards and B are invader cards for the sake of today's demo. Would you be alright with that, Jo?
Yeah, B is for bad guys.
Cool, we're good with that. So, what we're also going to do is we're going to clear the board away, because you don't actually need the board for the final assault, and it means that you'll have a clearer view of each individual character as they're playing along the game. So, let's move on to the final assault. So as part of this demonstration for the final assault, we've laid all the character cards out so you have a seamless view of what's going on with the whole state of play. In reality, you would only have a view of your own character card and equipment as part of this process. So first of all, we need to make sure all the characters are set up correctly. So when you enter the final assault, you remove certain tokens. For example, wanted level is removed. Glasses tokens are removed, and also additional items are removed, so unequipped items that the characters have to the side. I do want to point out though that the health or damage that you've received over the course of the game will remain the same, so it is important to make sure you've healed and equipped items before you enter the final assault. Any weapons or equipment that is equipped to your character remains equipped. You have that on your person. So that, as we said, that's important to set up, but it's also important to remember that in the final assault, it doesn't matter if you have equipped items that are related to invaders. So for example, Frank has an invader pistol and our detective up here has an invader machine gun. Because they're equipped, it means that you are free to use them. They will not be penalised. However, what we're going to demonstrate through the setup process for the 1 to 3 player mode and the campaign mode will be how cards that have been paid in, if they're invader cards, will have an impact on your overall play. Also, one final rule for this demonstration is that Holly will always be the invader in this demonstration. The reason for that, quite simply, 1, it fits in with the movie, and 2, it means that you can keep a track of what's going on and when Holly comes into play. So first of all, we're going to show you the 1 to 3 player mode. So, as part of the setup and distribution of the cards, in the 1 to 3 player mode, you will have been controlling all of the characters as the game's progressed. In theory, if you were playing well, you should have investigated each relevant character by coming into conflict with yourself and checking to see which character is an invader. In this instance, Holly has not been weeded out, and unfortunately she has made it to the final assault. Because of that, it means that there will be a further punishment. So as part of the setup for this, you take your cards from your resources that have been acquired over the course of the game. And first of all, you look at them with your glasses on and you determine which cards are for the humans and which cards for the invaders. So remember, we were talking about this earlier, any card with B will be an invader card. So invader human, this has nothing on, I'll explain that later. Invader human, invader human, 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 invader human. Okay, so first of all, as you were playing on your own, in theory, you should have been, keeping an eye on what cards were placed through. But as we know, sometimes when playing the game, in extreme circumstances, you may pay cards through without checking them properly. Now, because of this, some cards that are invader cards have made it into your deck. And this means that you get punished for bringing them through. So for every invader card, every card with a B, that means that you will lose a human card at random. Okay, so 1, 2. Now, as this is a junk card, and I'll explain how this works in the campaign, it's worth nothing, but it doesn't have an allegiance. In the campaign, it's something that an invader player can use to sort of poison the deck, as it were. Okay, so you don't get punished for that one, but it does waste a space, and then one more invader card. Meaning that now we have a lot less cards to pay through for our efforts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so moving these to one side. We then evenly distribute these among the players, going from left to right in play based on who is currently the resistance leader. So for example, for the sake of this, we're going to say our detective is the resistance leader. So face down, we shuffle these up and we distribute them 1, 2, 3, 4, with the odd one going back to the resistance leader. We would then use our glasses to work out who the invader is in play. As you already know, Holly is the invader. And because of that, Holly is removed from play, and any cards that has been placed on her are now lost to you, which means your resistance stash for the entirety of the end of this game is now down to just 4 cards to play with. So that means you're in the 1 to 3 player mode. You will now have 3 characters who will attempt to survive the trials of the cards, with 4 cards to give you additional bonuses. These bonuses will be based on the icons that are in the top corner, which give you additional stats boosts. And we'll explain those as we go through the final cards in the campaign part of the video. The setup for the main campaign is a little bit simpler. Quite simply, all of your characters make it to the end of the game. You then take your resistance cards and check them. You'll discover if there are any invader cards that have made it through. That probably means somebody in the party's been lying through the course of the game. And you'll also look at the cards that you have for your resistance stash. You separate these into 2 decks. So any cards that have an invader allegiance or that are junk will be placed with the invader side. Most cards that are labelled junk won't have any use or effect in the rest of the game. So they will be placed to one side. This deck now becomes a communal deck for the entire team to use to survive the trials. Now, the reason you have a lot more access to these cards is because, one, you've been managing this as a team, as separate people, and suspicion is a lot harder when you're not managing everything yourself compared to the single player mode. However, there are people in this who are then going to use influence to burn through your cards and to create more problems, which will progress as the final assault goes on. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this resistance resource deck to one side. Remember, none of this team knows that Holly is the invader. Nobody's checked anybody's cards. We're still fully undercover. And then we'll move on to actually taking on the final assault challenges. So you start the final assault by taking the cover card and having a read. Now, the cover card will have a very, very rousing speech for you to go through. Think Independence Day, think any film where somebody's, trying to rally up an army to go and fight. Nothing too depressing, nothing like we're going to get destroyed and we've got to back off. Okay? So, because of that, we're not going to read this out to you today. Just know it's a very, very big speech to get you pumped. That's the best way of describing that. And you move on to the first card. Now, if you remember the very original setup video, and you can go back and look at this, there'll be 3 cards and you'll have decided and set the difficulty based on what's in the instructions. And there will be 3 separate levels detailed on the bottom of the card here. So level 1 is the ground floor, level 2 is the medium floor, and level 3 is kind of the root of the problem, you know, maybe the top floor of the building if you're talking the movie, or it may be deep inside the compound. There's a number of things that can be, but the idea is that there is 3 levels that you progress through to complete the game. So if you pass all 3 of these, you win. The difficulty is denoted by the colour, which will be described in the instruction manual, and you'll be able to, you know, sort of set up your game in difficulty based on what's actually listed. Okay, so in our level 1 card, the Iron Door, we have some instructions here. I'm going to pass this off to Jo to let her read that through, and we're going to play through this card.
The Iron Door. You follow the delivery route around the back of the building and find a huge iron door next to steel shutters. It's the only thing that stands between you and getting into Cable 54. You wait for the guard patrol to pass, then rush to the door ready to find a way in. You have a choice. The iron door has hinges which could be loosened enough to get it open. So that's engineering plus 2 to the amount of players. Or there's a keypad lock with some rewiring. It could trigger the mechanism, and that is tech plus 2 to the amount of players.
Thanks for that, Jo. So, as you can see, there is a choice of 2, and this is where, as a group, you'll have a communal discussion about how you think it's going to be best to take on the event, basically. So, this is where the invader has kind of 2 options. Option 1 in this scenario is the invader keeps quiet, plays along, and maybe gets the group to burn through their cards, trying to complete the test, you know, as easily as possible, but also meaning the later ones may be more difficult. So in this, we're going to show that scenario first, and then we'll show you an alternative Holly scenario depending on what happens. So, first of all, the Iron Door. Let's have a look what we've got in our deck, and let's have a look what we've got as character stats. So, we have 2 for Dixon, 2 for Holly, 4 for Frank, and 4 for Nada. So that, to me, looks like quite a good amount of engineering amongst our characters. Looking through our equipment, we look in the top corner, not the stats down here. So in the top corner of this, we have engineering to the value of 2 on the toolbox. We have a cop, he's no use. We have a key card, some clothes, a watch. We have a computer. We have a portable radio, and we have a chain. So we have 2 sets of cards worth 2. So that means we could choose to play one of these and have guaranteed 2 successes, or we could play both of them and have a guaranteed 4 successes. The thing is, when we use these cards, they are then gone. So that means if for some reason we don't successfully pass this round, and we've used both of these cards, it means that we're not going to have an additional boost for the next time that we have to go through this process. So, let's say this is going on, it would be to Holly's advantage as the invader to say, I think we should use both sets of cards, wanted to get these used to stall the team if there's a problem. The rest of the team might be in the mind of saving the cards in case another engineering test comes up later. Bearing in mind, based on the difficulty, the cards in theory get harder as you progress through the game, so saving as many cards as possible is a good idea. For the sake of today, we're going to use one of these cards, the old tools worth 2, and we'll place that to one side. And then we're going to start from the leader, working his way through. So just to remember, all resistance cards must be played before you take the test, and also reveals by the invader must take place before the test is taken at the beginning. We'll explain more about that as we get into the invader reveals later. So let's start with Dixon up the top. So his engineering is 2. So for today, we haven't got our lovely dice that we normally have. We've got some standard dice, some D6s. So 5 and 6 are going to represent our kick-ass. Hopefully they'll roll better than we had last time, eh? So, Dixon's 2. And we have 1 success. Holly also has 2. And Holly also has 1 success. Even though she's the invader, she's maintaining her cover, she has to take place as, in play as normal. Then, moving on to Frank and Nada. Frank has 4, so hopefully we'll get a good roll. And Frank gets 1 success, so that's good. So we've got 3 so far. And remember, we've got our 2 there. We'll go back to that in a bit. Let's try Nada's. And Nada's 4. Let's try. And Nada has 1 success. So this is quite an interesting one, right? Because by the skin of his teeth, we've done it, but it opens up a series of options. So it's the group plus 2. So there's 4 currently in the group plus 2. So each character had a success, and then in addition we have the 2 successes on the toolbox, which allows us to pass that card successfully. So if Holly had been in the situation earlier on where she'd convinced the rest of the group to use both cards, we would have effectively wasted an additional engineering card which could be used for later. So Joe, let me pass you this and you can have a look at what the results are.
So, if we were to pass, the door opens with a metallic squeal, but you slip through without being seen, moving quickly past piles of boxes onto grey corridors. Eventually, you find yourselves in a stairwell, ready to delve deeper into the heart of the building, and that's when you would move on to the next card. However, if you were unlucky enough to fail, you would have triggered the alarm and somebody is coming. You would then draw an enemy tile at random and fight them as a team, as you would in the response phase. Once they are defeated, you must restart this card.
Interesting. Thank you, Joe. So first of all, you need the team plus 2, meaning that if we'd not played the old tools, we wouldn't have successfully passed this card. And we would have spawned an enemy, which would have resulted in us having to go into a combat encounter with an enemy, possibly losing life, creating issues for our progression. It's also worth noting in the instructions, it clearly states if you repeat a card 5 times, and haven't passed it successfully, you fail your final assault. So repeating these cards and wearing down your characters, especially in the early cards, is a really bad thing, What is important to remember, though, is that it's very important that we didn't play 2 sets of engineering cards. If Holly had convinced us to use 2 cards, we would have been 2 successes over what we needed and wasted that additional card. So let's see how this would have played out if Holly had revealed herself as an invader. Now we're going to rewind time. So the same iron door card is our first card, and Holly decides to, as her opening gambit, that she's going to reveal herself as an invader to the group. The rest of the group are shocked. People complain about the fact that their friends have been lying to them. That's not what happens in this house when it gets played anyway. So because of this, you guys obviously still have access to your original deck. Holly, however, is now off on her own. So we're just going to move her slightly up to one side, and Holly now has her own deck, which consists of these cards. So, like we've said already, the ration pack is a card that she doesn't need to use, so that can be binned off. She does have access to this alien device, which is worth 3. She has the homeless person, which is worth 1, and she has a box of cassette tapes, which is worth 1. Now, invader cards work differently to standard cards. These values are not tied to the specific thing that the other ones are. So for example, this one would not be tied to using your tech. This one would not be tied to using your stealth. This is really important because essentially invader cards are going to be less likely to get through unless an invader team is really, really well put together. So because of that, this allows them to combat the rest of the team more effectively. Let's see how this is going to play out. our team here decides that because Holly is an invader and they're worried about the invader cards that she has in her hand, they decide to take the engineering route, as Frank and Nada are both quite strong in engineering. However, they also decide to use the old tools, which is worth 2, and the chain this time, which is worth 2, bringing their successes automatically up to 4. The iron door now requires the amount in the team, so that is now 1, 2, 3, not including the invader, so it's 3 plus 2. So we've already had 4 successes, so now our team only needs to get 1 success for a total of 5. However, Holly, being an evil invader, decides she's not happy with that and looks at her hand and decides she wants to play the alien device. This is worth 3, making it more difficult for the players. So that now means the players as a team require 3 successes plus 2. They have 4 automatic successes, now reduced by 3. So we need a total of 4 successes to win. Let's get rolling and see what happens. So first of all, let's start with our detective. He has a total of 2 in engineering. Rolling this. Nothing. Great. Let's move to Frank. He has a total of 4 in engineering. Actually, he also has an additional 1 in cassette tapes. So that is actually 5, which we might have forgot last time, but I'm going to pretend to you all that we didn't forget to use his cassette tapes. Let's roll those 5. 1, 2 successes, meaning this all comes down to Nada again. So Nada needs 2 to win. Do you think we can get this?
Got my fingers crossed.
I've got my fingers crossed too. Come on, Nada. Come on. 1 job. And we have 1, we have 2 successes.
Yes.
So that means, luckily, we still managed to beat this, even though Holly has caused us a lot of problems, making those successes a lot harder. From what should have been 1 success and a clean sweep has now been almost rolling against the entirety of the event. Now, because we've completed that card, and as we've said earlier, we'd progress and the story beats would take place, we do have another option now. We get the option to fight Holly in combat if we want to as a group. So let's have a look at that. So when you decide to engage an invader, as a team, you need to work out together who wants to engage the invader. There's a reason for this. To balance the way that invaders combat a team, I want you to think of this in the context of those really narrow corridors and surprise attacks and things like that from the movie, okay? So narratively, it's very important because the invader in this situation, cornered, can deal out a lot more damage than a normal combatant, okay? So as you are in a team, if you decide all 3 members of your team want to roll against the invader, that means Dixon, Nada and Frank, all their rolls would count in combat for combat against Holly. When Holly rolls back to fight against them, each damage or each success she rolls would be 1 damage to each individual player. So it's really important, first of all, to decide as a team who wants to engage Holly in combat. For example, Dixon here has already got 2 damage, meaning that he may be in a situation where if he receives a lot of damage from Holly, who's armed with a pump-action shotgun, I might remind you, it means that he may suffer more than some of the other players. So you need to make a decision of who's going to fight who and who's going to take that damage. If you choose not to fight her, the invader escapes to the next phase and will be able to interfere in the second card as you progress. If you choose to combat her and fight her, it means that her deck is essentially dead, and that it means that she won't be in a position where she can continue to hamper your progression. So it is a very, very important choice to make. Let's have a look what the rolls look like. So first of all, our team has decided that they're all going to go in combat against Holly together. So Detective Dixon, he's the resistance leader, he's going to fight first. Let's have a look. So we're not in a position where we're rolling to see who gets the first hit or anything like that. We're going to be fighting an enemy combatant first. So Dixon has a total of 4 combat plus an additional 3 for his dual-wielding assault rifle, giving him a total of 7 combat and 7 possible damage. So we're going to roll 6 dice to start and then an additional. And he's not a very good shot, because he's hit nobody with that. Well done, Detective Dixon. You've been consistently rubbish through the entirety of the game. 1 final dice for Dixon. And he gets nothing. So let's see what the rest of them look like. So Frank's go next. Let's have a look. Frank has 3 combat and his additional pocket pistol for 1 damage. So that means Frank is going to be rolling 4 dice. Let's have a go. And Frank has 1, 2 successes, so that's 2 damage against Holly. So let's pop them in straight away and see how that goes. Let's move on to Nada. And Nada, let's see how well he's going to do. He's got 4 combat plus his pistol, so that gives us 5 dice. Let's see if we're going to get 4 successes out of that, eh, Nada? He's not done bad, he's got 2, so that's 2 additional damage. So that's 1, 2. So Holly's took 4 damage. Holly is then going to make an additional attack on the team. Let's see how that goes. So Holly has a total of 3 damage plus a pump action shotgun, meaning she has 5 dice. So we're going to roll this. And she has 1, 2, 3 successes. So that is quite a lot of damage attributed to our entire team. And you can see how this can be a problem. So Frank takes 3, but survives. Nada takes 3, but survives. And Dixon takes 3, but survives. Barely. He's on 2 health now, so that's quite a risky... See, this is why it can be very risky letting an invader into the final encounter, and it's why you need to weed them out very quickly. Holly now moves on to the next card, because we were successful. She escapes. And Holly then has a choice. Because the next card that comes up is card number 2, Holly can choose, like when she does a reveal, if she wants to interfere in this card at all. Or maybe she could wait it out and then interfere in card 3. It's up to her as she progresses. So what you need to remember is that if you don't take the invader out, they can really just show up at the end and you know, hold their entire deck to the end to smash you and to damage you, you know, long term. It's very important to get them before you get to this point. You then will progress, hopefully, being a little bit more successful and less damage than we've got here, and progress and pass the additional 2 cards. If you successfully pass all 3 cards, you then get to read the wonderful victory speech in the instruction manual confirming you've completed the game. Either way, pass or fail, it's important to read the ending of the game in the instruction manual, as it'll give sort of an overarching story to the whole experience. Thank you very much for watching our videos for the Assault on Cable 54. I hope you've enjoyed the final assault and you can see the impact that it has on the overall game and what you're working towards. Please comment below and thank you very much for all your support on Kickstarter.